felt I have to tell you this. I know that I love you. And will do forever. So you're really looking for a singer then?
This is the television programme which brought you the first appearances from the Beatles to the Clash, as you'll soon know about these lot. They're called Joy Division.
Hi, my name is Orian Williams, and this is BELLUS TV. What I do and who I am are kind of the same thing. I am a film producer. I live in Los Angeles, California. I come from Mississippi, born there, raised in Texas. Many things sort of shaped my aesthetic. Photography was a big part of my life. Music. Growing up in Houston, I was exposed to many different types of bands. It was country music and rock and roll, and the music that was on the radio in my mom's car, and my first concert, Elvis Presley, and many other weird little sort of things that led me to different types of music was concerts and just my mom and family, old gospel music. And it happened over the course of one summer between my junior and senior year in high school, where I started attending this club called Numbers in Houston, and they played alternative music. It was a very ambitious and yet liberal scene compared to Houston, Texas, where most people are Southern Baptists and do their own thing. Houston was pretty liberal because it was a big city, but in this club, bands would come and play, and this is the early 80s, and I saw a lot of bands perform there, from The Cure and Love and Rockets and The Cult and different kinds of Jane's Addiction, whatever, in that little scene. But they would they'd have these music videos projected on the big screen behind just this area, and I was fixated on it. And the early videos of the Smiths and the Cocteau Twins, and just bands that I had not heard of but became aware of through this club. I worked at a record store, and next door was a bookstore that had import magazines. And these magazines were like Face and Blitz and Enemy. And they were photographs of these bands that I was seeing on the video screen. So I became sort of fixated into this whole arena of art and music and cinema. And the video director for most of the videos was Anton Corbijn, who was someone I had a lot of respect for, because he was photographing the bands that I loved, Joy Division and Front 242 and Propaganda and Depeche Mode. And I thought, man, that guy's cool. But I didn't know that there was any way you could ever get to know him or link to him or have any connection to him, or even, for that matter, meeting the guy. Then I went to college, graduated college, and moved to Los Angeles. And after graduating, kind of hoping to somehow get involved in the world of film or art or acting or music. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I had a lot of passions. And the movie Blade Runner had a big influence in my life because of the photography element of it, because of the aesthetic of it all, because of the music by Vangelis. And it was a love story set in the future, but in the past. And there was all these things going on. So I thought, wow, I want to do something like that. So I ended up finding that I had a gift of bringing people together, whether it be a director or an actor, a writer, a photographer, a band, something I had this kind of connection to. And I ended up having this idea to bring this director that I had met, who made this really avant-garde film, and introduce him to someone that was a fan of that avant-garde film. That was Nicolas Cage. And Nick, he loved all sorts of things. 2-week journey, trying to get a hold of this guy, finally get a hold of Nick. We sit in a room one day, not long after this contact, and he had a script called Shadow the Vampire. It was a movie he had always wanted to be involved in as an actor, but felt like producing, maybe he should produce it or direct it or something. He didn't know. This guy, Elias Marriage, the young filmmaker, had created this other world with his film, which inspired Nick. So Nick says, well, why don't you direct this film, and Orion, you can produce it, and we'll make the film. And so we did. And John Malkovich was in it, Willem Dafoe, and it's called Shadow the Vampire. And so it was, for me, it was kind of like, okay, I'm bringing all these elements together, these people that I love. I'm going to do it again. And I sought after my favorite photographer, the guy that had inspired me many years ago, and that was Anton. So I went after him to just see if he had interest in making a movie, anything. And sure enough, he had been thinking about it. And curious, he had no idea really what he wanted to do, but he knew what he didn't want to do, and that was music, films, movies about the bands that he'd photographed. I thought, well, that's too bad, because I've got this Joy Division film, and he photographed Joy Division. I mean, that would be really fantastic if he would jump on board this film, but he didn't want to. And I understood why. It made sense, you know. It's very close to him. That story was very personal, which in the end was exactly the reason why he decided to do it, because it was very close to him and very personal. And he moved to London to follow his favorite band, Joy Division. So he's like, maybe I'm the only guy to make this movie. And I said, well, to me, you are. And he goes, but it's a music film. I said, it's a love story. Hands down.
You nervous or what? This is just the start.
He is quite famous now, though, isn't he?
Not to me. I still wash his underpants.
We're Joy Division, you're the crowd, good night. I hold my hands up. I am a believer in Joy Division. Hallelujah.
Who's that?
Anik wants to do an interview.
You were married so young.
My marriage was a mistake.
Who's Anik?
Just answer me! Please answer me!
Take as long as you need. How long do you need?
I never meant for it to grow like this. I've no control anymore.
And that's where it all started. And that's how Control came together. And that was a 10-year journey from 97 to 2007. So I guess, you know, I look back now on my career and the other films that I've been involved in, and every element of every film that I'm a part of has something that connects to me as a human being, whether it's goes back to that club numbers music or the aesthetic of a music video or just texture, or, you know, a lot of the books I have around here are photographs that represent exactly how I imagine a time period. So I can kind of travel in time a little bit with these movies, and that's fun. Going back to the 70s, a lot of the movies I'm doing are in different time periods. So you go and you're immersed in this atmosphere of people in clothing that's from a different time period, you know, from the 50s, the 40s, the 60s, the 70s, in a different country. And they look like they're from that. It's just kind of weird moments of, like, you know, separation from who we are today.
Can you tell me a little bit about what was involved and what it took to make the movie Control?
So a lot of things went into getting Control made. A lot of time spent. You know, I mean, this is where I live now, where we are, is actually the place that where I had the idea. And in an office off this kitchen there is where I was sitting there at my desk thinking, you know, what am I going to do in my life? And I remember taking a book that I'd optioned or I bought at Book Soup, Touching from a Distance, which was written by Deborah Curtis, the widow of Ian Curtis. And I just put it on the wall on my shelf next to an Anton photo book. I thought, oh my God, you know, that's the guy that needs to direct this. So those early, I mean, I can't think, and when you're in the midst of it, you don't actually go, you know, what an epiphany. You only look back on it once you're years down the road and you go, I can connect the dots to where I am today through these small decisions that at the time seemed insignificant. But getting Anton to say yes was a big hurdle, and just it was perfect the way it happened. Getting the actors, getting the money, getting the music rights from New Order, who were for the most part reluctant initially to even be involved in a film about their best friend and the guy that, you know, created their sound. They all had very different versions of who they saw Ian Curtis as. One thought he was a laughable, you know, funny guy. Another one thought he was kind of quiet and introspective, and the other one thought he was, you know, a jerk and not very nice to anyone. Well, he was all those things, and they sort of gleaned their own interpretation of who he was in their own experience. So these hurdles were getting music rights, getting the script perfect. The guy that wrote the script I met through an actor friend who suggested him at his birthday party one day. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. He's from Manchester. I'm looking for someone from Manchester. So I got his email address, wrote him, called him the next day, and flew and met him and gave him the job. And it was kind of one of those sort of just, it felt right moments, you know. And a lot of what I do are there are those moments where you just feel, it feels right. You know, it just seems like there's a convergence of perfect timing with the right, you know, ideas. And I mean, it's what a meeting is, really. I mean, you talk, somebody, you don't know why you're sitting there with someone. You know, in this conversation, we can have something come out of it that I would never even imagined I would say, and something you probably wouldn't have imagined you'd thought, but you carry that on to the next meeting, interview, conversation, or project, and things come out of that. But in the end, getting Control made was finding, you know, Sam Riley, the actor, to play Ian Curtis. There were a lot of actors who were big name actors who meant a lot of money to the film, but they weren't the right guy. And when we saw Sam for the first time, it's like, oh my God, that's Ian Curtis. You know, we just knew that was him. So, but of course the financing fell apart. Things happen, you know. Anton's cash flowing the film. I'm putting my savings in, deferring my salary, just to keep this little magic trip, this journey going. We were all going through our own personal journey, and a lot of the films I have is a journey, as I said earlier. Big Sur, a film that I made also, for us it was going off to Big Sur and just experiencing the land, and then capturing it on film with a bunch of people that were in period clothing again and looking like they were the parts, speaking this language of a different time. And not many people bought into the Joy Division idea. They thought, there's no way that this film's going to get made by a first-time director, a first-time actor, a first-time screenwriter, and a DP who had shot one feature. How do you get something made off the ground? How do you get something going from those few elements?
And on top of it, all the actors were performing the actual songs, right?
That's true. And what's interesting when you ask, you know, how did this whole thing come together? There were so many moments I can look back on that were captured on film for the film itself and then for a documentary that's being made. But the actors were not guys who thought we were a bunch of actors just going to pretend to be these people. They became a band. Two of them learned how to play their instruments, had never touched their instrument before, and had to actually learn properly how to play guitar. James Anthony Pierce, the guitarist who played Bernard Sumner, had never touched the guitar, but when he got the job, he went off and played. And it was kind of appropriate because Bernard Sumner from New Order and Joy Division looked down at his guitar the whole time he performed. So it was this nice thing because it gave the actor the ability to look down at his guitar. So we thought, these guys, you know, we're just going to have them mime to the music. But a couple weeks into rehearsals, I remember Anton and I were sitting in the office, and they came up and they asked if we could come down to the studio for a second. We went down to the studio, and we were sort of like, okay, what are you going to do? And they turned on some stuff, and they played Leaders of Men by Warsaw, pre-Joy Division. And I remember Anton looking at me and looking back, going, that's them playing. Oh my God. We know. I'll tell you what, we'll have you guys play that song live, and then the other ones will mime. And they said, don't worry, we've learned all of them. So they learned every Joy Division song and played about 3 or 4 of them. It was a mini concert with Anton and I sitting there just watching, going, this is Joy Division alive again. You know, it was a real strange, wonderful experience. And they did. They performed those songs live in the movie. You know, of course, you record the song and you mime to yourself, as you know, and that's what they did. We were recorded in the space hours before we actually shot them for film, and they would just mime to themselves. But a couple of times they're just playing, and we recorded it live and just cut between cameras. So it was an incredible experience seeing these guys come together, and when they're in costume, and when they're on stage, and in black and white, which we were looking at the monitors, it felt very real.
Wow. Do you think, people I've run into who've seen the movie Control, I usually get one of two reactions. Either they haven't seen it yet or know what it is, but when they have seen it, they're obsessed with it. And do you think because you brought the right people together that were passionate about the project and went beyond just making a movie to make money, it did something as an art piece is why that you created that effect.
Yeah, not a day goes by. It seems like I'm talking to someone who either loved Joy Division. Once we made the movie not for the Joy Division fans, we made it for ourselves certainly, but for people who'd never heard of the band. You have to think of it like that. You have to think of, I'm going to introduce this movie to people hopefully they like the story outside of the fact that it's this movie about a band that had a couple hit songs and became New Order and whatnot. There was a bit of pressure with that. Making sure that we were checking all the boxes and not doing anything too outrageous. But in the end, we had to make him our Ian and our Joy Division. Anton did such a great job with working with the actors and working with every person on the set, from the crew to the PA to the DP, who was someone he had decided to use and had worked with on some music videos. There's a nostalgic quality that comes with the film being shot in black and white. I could never, when I see the movie today, when it's on TV or just in general, or someone's watching it and I catch it, I feel as if I wasn't there. But of course I was there. I was there the whole time, sitting on every scene, watching it in color. So when it's projected in black and white, you feel as if this is something else. This is another worldly thing. It doesn't feel modern at all. It feels like a little time capsule. And the reason it was shot in black and white, which was Anton's idea, was because Joy Division had never been photographed in color. They had been photographed mostly in black and white. So it felt very black and white. The time period was black and white. It was Manchester, the factories and the sort of dirt and the sky and the smog and the whatnot. It all was very black and white. But I meet a lot of kids from friends of mine who worship this movie. They love it for some reason. There's a passion that comes from watching, this guy self-destruct, and who could have been, and lived a very short but very powerful life. And of course, I never met him. I'd seen New Order many years ago. I remember a story. Growing up in Texas, one of the shows, one of my first concerts as a teenager was New Order. And I remember driving around. I got a backstage, and I was with the band, and we were in a car. We're driving around. I'm like, I'm in the car with New Order, and this is incredible. Like this, I've reached my peak. That's it. I can retire. And I remember driving the car at some point, and driving Hookie back to the hotel, and I'm like, I have to tell him I love him because I'm never going to see him again. So I looked over and I said, I just have to tell you, you're one of my favorite bands ever. You mean a lot to me. He's like, yeah, okay. I thought, I guess that's it. I figured, well, I can at least tell my kids that I met the band. And I would never have thought in a million years that I would have had this opportunity to even bring their story to life. It just changed me as an individual. So the influence, and I can only speak for myself and the people that I talk to, the movie's had its own life and has influenced people to do whatever they do, but it's been special.
Leads me to another question. Two-part. One, in terms of the integrity of the film, is it true that you shot in all the actual locations that he lived and he walked and he worked? So you kept it true to his life? And what was the experience when you screened the film to his actual band?
So a lot of the locations that we filmed in, well, first of all, we didn't shoot in Manchester at all. We wanted to shoot there, but there was no tax incentive and credit and no reason for us to shoot there. And plus the city looked quite different. The story is set in Macclesfield and Manchester and surrounding areas, and we had not a lot of money, so we had to make do what we could. There's a city not far away called Nottingham, and Nottingham has an incentive, an East Midlands, sort of tax credit. And it's like, well, it's stuck in the 70s, this town. About the same size as Manchester was probably at the time. So we filmed there. But Macclesfield, this little city, not far from Manchester, where the band they were raised, they met and performed their first shows, hadn't changed at all. And so we approached the people that actually lived in the real house. This young 20-year-old couple who barely knew of who Joy Division was, but knew that, Ian had offed himself in the kitchen of their own little home with their baby. It was kind of interesting because we were looking at a couple from today which was exactly the couple from many years ago in the same place, same age, same baby, the whole thing. And we filmed all the exteriors of Ian and Debbie walking in and out of the house, the real home. And then down the street was an office, and there's a scene in the movie where Ian Curtis walks down the street, turns, and he has hate on the back of his jacket. As he makes his way to another building and walks in, that's the actual office that he worked. We changed the interiors because, you have to. And it was really great to have him make that journey that Ian took every day, and then we filmed it and captured it on film, which was magical and inspiring for the actors to feel like, okay, this is the real deal. The location feels right. Getting the film, I mean, literally it was 2 years to the date from the idea, 10 years to the date, getting this movie from its idea to the screen. Halfway through that, I would never have thought it was going to take another 5 years. If I knew, I'd probably be like, well, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to do this. We were turned down by Berlin in the film festival. For some reason, they just felt like it wasn't the right film, whatever. Ken offered us an opening slot to open the festival, and we were very excited by that, very moved by that. We also knew this was going to be the first time that anyone had seen the film outside of the producers and the director. So their opening night, everyone's sort of, mingling around, they're excited about Control. And so is the guys in the band, New Order. And I don't think they knew what to expect. They scored the movie, which was a special thing for them to do the music for the film. That was the last music they ever composed together as a real band. And then they've gone their separate ways, and they're still New Order, but they're broken up anyway. It's a different story. But I remember we were 10th row, center, holding hands, Sam Riley on my right, Toby Kebbell on my left. We're just like, this is exciting. I'd seen the film. None of these actors had. They had no clue what was going on. And the lights went down, and they were just mesmerized by it. And watching them watch themselves and watching the movie was more exciting for me than to see it again on a big screen. However, it was very exciting. The tension that kind of came, that led us into the cinema, there were 800 people, there in the cinema, maybe more, I think. We were all excited but nervous about what was happening behind us. The three guys in the band, sitting there with their wives, seeing their lives come to life on screen, as well as their old buddy. And I remember the film finishes, there's standing ovation, people are cheering, whenever we stand up, we turn around, and as I turn around, they're walking out of the audience. I'm like, oh my God, they hate it. They don't like the film. Look at Anton, he's like, whatever. So we make our way to this green room with the actors, and they're crying and cheering up, and we're all weak at this point because we've been working on this film a long time. We're not being overly dramatic. We're just, okay, it's done. Let's move on. But this was also exciting. We walked in the room, and I remember seeing the guys in the band who were distraught with emotion. And I thought, oh my God, they're really affected by this in a big way. It really brought back a lot of emotion for them to see their life come, from this time. They hadn't seen anything like this. So they loved it. And had, again, they all had their own different, separate interpretation of Ian, but yet they all felt like that was Ian. We captured it somehow.
How did that make you feel when you saw his band members right after seeing the movie you helped put together and you produced and just liked it and loved it?
Yeah, it made me feel great. I felt like I accomplished something. I mean, I deferred my salary. I didn't make a dime on the film. Still haven't. And it's the kind of thing where you don't do it for the money. You don't do it for, great. Mom is always like, where is your salary? It's like, it's been 7 years. I'll get it. But you do it for other reasons, and for me it was a huge accomplishment. It felt great. What made me most happy was, seeing Anton make his first feature and do something that he was happy with, that I was happy with. That made me more excited than anything. Just to know that there was this combination of, the reason Anton moved to London from Holland was to follow his favorite band, Joy Division, and photograph them, to see his journey, to watch through my own eyes was really cool.